growing up, my family had a very unique tradition. We were involved in what is called the Mesa Easter Pageant. And the Easter Pageant is the largest outdoor Easter pageant in the world. And when I was young, my favorite scene in the Easter pageant was the parable of the 10 virgins. And it still is today. But when I was young, at one point there was a part in the pageant where we would all be facing and listening to the Savior speak. After he was done speaking, we were supposed to stay really still and not move and keep our focus on the Savior as the dancers for the parable came out and did their dance. Well, I always found a way to turn my body just right, to peek around and hide behind my mom so that I can always watch the dancers dance. And I did that for years because I just loved them. When I grew up, I finally got the chance to be one myself. And so this scene has always held a really special place in my heart and has always been an important part of my life and my beliefs. And in it, the scene is based off of the parable in Matthew 25 and verses 1 through 13. And that's the parable of the 10 virgins. And in it, it talks about 5 wise virgins and 5 foolish. And at this point in time, there was the bridegroom who came, or the Savior. And he entered into the city and took them into a feast or into a wedding party. And the 5 wise had oil in their lamps. And so they were ready to go in. And they were invited into this party. The foolish did not have oil in their lamps. They were not prepared for the bridegroom to just come at any time. So they ran around, they asked people for oil, they even asked the wise virgins, "You guys have oil in your lamps, can you share with us?" And the wise said, "No, we cannot." So the foolish did not have oil in their lamps, and therefore they were not permitted into the party. So in this we learn, do we think that the wise virgins were being mean when they told the foolish, "No, we can't share our oil with you"? What do you think? No? Well, Marvin J. Ashton said, "The responsibility for having oil in our personal lamps is an individual requirement and opportunity. The oil of spiritual preparedness cannot be shared." So just like being temporally prepared for things, we need to be spiritually prepared for things. And that is what we learn from this parable, and that we need to always be prepared. And it is a personal thing. It's not something we can rely on somebody else for. We cannot rely on our parents, on our friends, or our children. It is something that we need to do ourselves and constantly be working on and putting oil in our lamps. Every day we need to be adding a little bit of oil to our lamps. So in the parable, it also talks about time, where the bridegroom comes. We never know when that's going to happen, so we need to always be ready and be prepared. Well, time is irrelevant to me personally. I'm not always thinking of, I need to be ready for the second coming, which is what a lot of people think with this parable. But yet, we need to be ready at all times for anything that may happen in our lives. Elder Holland tells this story about a young man who just joined the church, and he was about 18 years old, and he was the only member in his family. And one night he went out on a date. Well, something happened on this date that he came home and he was very disappointed with himself. And we don't know what it was, and it's not relevant to the story. But he got home from the date and sat in his car in his driveway, just feeling really sad and disappointed at what had just transpired. And at that point, his mom came running out of the house and pounded on his window, "Come help, come help, come help." His little brother had had a seizure and at that point was unconscious. And his mom said, "Isn't there something you can do with your religion? Can't you give him some special prayer or something? I need you to make him better." And at that point, this young man's heart just sank because he knew he was not in a position to give his brother a blessing. So he had to go find a neighbor and go ask for help to get this young man a blessing. And the little brother ended up being fine and everything worked out, but this is an experience that stuck with this young man for years and years. And this young man was later giving a talk that Elder Holland was listening to, and he talked about this experience and how it has always stuck with him. And how he said he had felt the feeling of discouragement and despair of not being prepared and not being ready. And he never wanted to have that feeling again. So he vowed from that night on to always be prepared and be worthy and ready for anything that may come. In D&C 33:17 we read, "Wherefore be faithful, praying always, having your lamps trimmed and burning, and oil with you, that you may be ready at the coming of the bridegroom." So again, we learn that we need to be ready at any time. So what does that mean for us? What does that mean we need to do? Does that mean we need to have big things and we need to constantly be getting our food storage ready or getting financial reserves ready? Well, of course, those are all things we should be doing because we never know what may happen. I think we have found that most recently with the COVID-19 happening right now, that we've needed to have some reserves ready to go. But in this sense, it's being spiritually prepared. And what are we doing every day to fill our lamps and be ready for anything that life may throw at us, just like the young man in the story? I know that if we are able to do what we can every day to fill our lamps, that we will be ready. We need to make that decision ourselves to be prepared, to strive to do everything we can. It can be doing something nice for somebody every day, sending a nice text, sending a little message or note, even just giving somebody a smile or saying hello to somebody at the grocery store. Even little things make a difference and add oil into our lamps. And if we are constantly using the Savior as our example and working hard to fill our lamps, that we will be blessed in our lives. Thank you.